So, do any of you remember where you were on the Friday night of December 16th, 2016? Were you in a crowded theater watching Rogue One with your nerdy sisters, or were you normal? Maybe you were instead out dancing the night away at a fancy holiday party in the most sequined, itchy dress you own, which you surely regretted wearing the next day when you realized your whole body was covered in a rather nasty rash, and that you'd had too much eggnog.
And you remembered you still had half a bottle of Nog stashed at home.
But if you're like me and everyone else in that crowded theater in 2016, you were not normal because you were about to watch a movie that would stay with you forever. This story, these characters, will live in your brain rent-free from that moment on. Yeah, Rogue One quickly became one of my favorite movies ever, generally speaking, not just within the Star Wars. It broke my brain in so many ways, and I will talk all about that in another video on another day. So a few years passed, and just when I thought, maybe I'm ready to move on, Lucasfilm said, no, sweetie, no. Because in 2022, Andor came out on Disney Plus, and I was sucked into my Rogue One era once again. Andor is a prequel series following one of my favorite characters from Rogue One, Cassian Andor. Andor is set a few years before the events of Rogue One and tells the story of how Cassian joined the rebellion and became the captain we all know and loved in the 2016 film. Tony Gilroy is the Andor showrunner, and since he also co-wrote Rogue One, I was expecting them to cook this time. I was expecting Star Wars to deliver something coherent, at the very least, which in all honesty they haven't done all that much since 2017. But I don't think anyone was expecting Lucasfilm to cook to this degree. People loved Andor. It was nominated for several Emmys. It was met with near universal praise from critics, and even more perplexingly, from the Star Wars fandom itself, which is famously divided between the people who genuinely love it and the guys who yell their hatred for it on YouTube for money. Or, wherever you get your podcasts. And I must admit, Andor is easily one of the best things Star Wars has ever done, but also one of the best pieces of television, period. One of the many things I loved about it is that it's Star Wars, but not in the traditional sense. We don't see any lightsabers or any magical force mumbo-jumbo nonsense, as Han Solo would put it. Andor is first and foremost a political spy thriller, and although it's set in a galaxy far, far away, you don't need to know anything about that galaxy in order to enjoy it. Weirdly enough, even though Andor is so tonally different from any other Star Wars, I think it's the perfect gateway drug to Star Wars. All you need to know is that there's a galaxy somewhere, and a fascist empire is slowly but surely trying to take over that galaxy. That's it. That's the only context anyone needs to watch the show. And since the second and final season of Andor is coming out this month, I decided I needed to make a video explaining why this show has me in a chokehold, and why you should join me in the collective Andor brain rot. Also, hi, if you're new here, my name is Suchi, and welcome to my channel, where I talk about the stories that move me. So as I said, Andor Season 2 is coming out real soon. So in this video, I want to revisit Season 1, take a closer look at this complex world and all the different characters we meet in it, and speculate on how Season 2 will take us right up to the beginning of Rogue One. I've been wanting to do an Andor deep dive for such a long time, and when Season 2 is fully out, I'll probably do a separate video for that as well, because this is how lost in the Andor sauce I am. I will yap on the Senate floor for hours about it if given the chance. And it now seems as good a time as any to do it, so let's get into it. I think it's easiest to go through Andor episode by episode, so that's what I'm going to do. But before we get into that, I think I quickly want to talk about some of the characters first, because there are a lot of them, and they all deserve a brief but loving introduction. First up is of course our boy Cassian Andor, played by Diego Luna. When we see him in Rogue One, he's a captain of the rebellion. He comes across as someone who definitely has his life together. Especially when you compare him to someone like Jyn Erso, he is absolutely the calm, responsible one between the two of them. But not here. No. This man is not here yet. He owes money to at least 10 different people at any given time, and can usually be found sneaking off to do things he isn't supposed to be doing. In short, Cassian is a mess when we first see him in Andor. A beautiful mess, but a mess all the same. I love him so much, that's my baby. We have Mon Mothma in this show. Yes, the famous senator from Chandrila who becomes a leader of the Rebel Alliance as we saw her in Rogue One and the original trilogy. But it's only in Andor that we get to learn who she really is and where she comes from. And it's so incredibly well done. Genevieve O'Reilly gives such a nuanced performance of Mon Mothma, and many of her scenes are just her sitting in a fancy room, but they really do steal the show in a lot of ways. Speaking of characters who were also in Rogue One, Saw Gerrera is in this. We don't see him all that much, but yeah, he's still the same Saw. Still against the Empire, but also very much an extremist and generally mistrustful of others. There's Luthen Rael, played by Stellan Skarsgård. Yes, the rumors are true. The Baron Harkonnen decided he needed to do something a little different, you know? He decided he needed to go to a different galaxy and also only eat kale salad every day until he looked like this. Anyway, you know a production is about to slap if Stellan is in it, so that's all I'll say for now. There's Bix Colleen, played by Adria Arjona. She's a mechanic from Cassian's hometown and probably definitely his ex. They clearly have some history there. And listen, I am a certified rebel captain, Jin Cassian truther, but you best believe Bix Colleen has my whole heart. I love her a lot. She's just a girl who got caught up in Cassian's mess and terrible things happened to her because of it. She's just a girl. She should just leave when shit hits the fan. She's too pretty for all of this nonsense. But she doesn't, because she's a good person. And I'm sad thinking about it, so let's move on. There's Marva Andor, played by Aunt Petunia from Harry Potter. Like the Baron Harkonnen, she decided to go to a galaxy far, far away and stay there, which, you know, not the best decision considering that war is about to break out. Marva is Cassian's mother. We love her. More to come on this. There's B2 Emo. He's Marva's droid. He's a stuttery little guy who just wants to spend time with the people he loves, but they keep leaving him. What's with that? I'm sad. Again. We have Vel Sartha. She's someone Luthen has recruited to the rebellion. There's a few characters in Andor living a sort of double life between what they want the rest of the world to see and who they really are, and Vel is one of them. There's also Cinta, the one Vel shares her blankets with, if you get my drift. And she will stab you with a rusty knife in the name of the rebellion. I mean, what else would you expect from someone with this lethal of a face card? And now we're getting to some of the juicier characters, the antagonists. We have Dedra Miro. She's a high-ranking officer working at the Imperial Security Bureau, or the ISB. The most girl-bossy girly in this Star Wars. She just gets things done, you know? And yes, I know she's Empire and everything, and we're supposed to be against her, but I support women's rights and wrongs, so there's that. And finally, we have the most insane tryhard to ever exist, Cyril Karn. This man does not know the meaning of relaxation or letting go. These are foreign concepts to him. Once this guy locks in, he's locked in until he gets the thing done. He quickly became one of my favorite Star Wars characters ever. He's just so intense for no reason at all, and it's so much fun to watch. Cyril is not technically an Imperial, but he supports the Empire. Or so he thinks. More on that later. Episode 1, Casa. So, like I mentioned earlier, when we are introduced to Cassian Andor in Rogue One, he is a captain in the rebellion. He's an experienced spy. He keeps his wife Jyn Erso in line. He knows who he is, what he's doing, and why he's doing it at all times. But this version of Cassian, he's on the run. Why? Because he got into trouble being somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. Where was he? Slacking off work to visit a brothel on a nearby planet to find his sister. I will say this is one of the first scenes in the show, and it already reads so much more mature, I guess is the best way to describe it. Like this is clearly some kind of red light district Cassian is walking around in, very Akira or Blade Runner vibes, which I find such an interesting departure from the earlier Star Wars films. And I know themes like this were alluded to in scenes with Jabba the Hutt and when Leia is held captive by him, but Andor very explicitly mentions that brothels are a thing in the galaxy far, far away. And that's just one of the things here that changes the tone of this show to something much darker and grittier. So Cassian is at this brothel looking for a girl from Kenari who is his sister, but the madam says she's no longer there, so Cassian leaves. He also runs into some local corporate thugs who decide they don't like the way he looks and try to corner him on his way back to his ship, but Cassian fights them off and then accidentally kills one of them. And then not so accidentally kills the other guy. I found this scene an interesting callback to how we first see Cassian in Rogue One, who just point blank shoots a contact in the name of the rebellion. Cassian is clearly someone who isn't afraid to pull the trigger, but he does feel the trigger. I think in both instances he regrets what he's done, but there's also the grim acceptance that what he did was necessary. Cassian realizes it would not be so prudent to stick around after killing the two corporate employees, so he flies back home to Ferrix, where he runs into his friend Brasso. And Brasso's like, "You weren't home last night, and what happened to your face, dude?" Cassian goes, No, I totally was here. I met you last night. We went to your place for a drink of nog. Was it eggnog? And Brassel's like, "Oh, yeah. And then you fell over. That's why you have bruises all over your face. It's not because you were beaten up by some guys that you ended up killing in a back alley or anything." One thing about Brasso, he's a homie. A real one for life. We've only seen like 2 minutes of him, but I love him. He's great. That's one thing we quickly find out about Ferrix. It's very much like this small town where everybody knows everyone type of vibes. And one implication of being in a place like that is that everyone knows your business too. Which makes life kind of hard for Cassian because he's constantly going off-world trying to find his long-lost sister and clearly doesn't have the money for it, so he's constantly borrowing the funds needed to make these trips happen. It's so jarring to watch this version of Cassian where he's just so shifty and up to no good, owes everyone within a 5-mile radius money, compared to the smooth, blank-faced spy who you just can't get a read on in Rogue One. But it's also kind of funny. Literally everyone on Ferrix knows Cassian's doing things he shouldn't be. It's just a collective, "what did you do this time?" from anyone he meets. Also, some people just come up to him straight up being like, "Where's the money I lent you?" And Cass just shrugs and goes, "It's in play." Sure, whatever that means. Honestly, I doubt even Cassian knows what that means anymore. Speaking of Ferrix, I believe it's some sort of industrial or junkyard planet. A lot of the citizens seem to be working in processing scrap or parts from starships. The show's crew built a massive set for this. Almost the entire city was physically built out and very little is CGI'd, which makes it look so real and lived in, especially for the shots where the characters are continuously walking through the streets. So, remember those two thugs Cassian killed? Well, Deputy Inspector Cyril Karn is on the case. He goes to his superior and is like, "Hey, 2 of our employees appear to have been murdered. This is bad. We should look into this and bring the guy who did it to justice. I will not rest until we find him. And also, I've tailored my soup to optimize its function because I'm a raging perfectionist and obsessed with maintaining order in all things." His superior's like, "Whoa, relax. These guys weren't even supposed to be at a brothel. We also aren't supposed to have brothels. It was just an unfortunate accident. Just make something up and say they died protecting the peace or something." Which Cyril does not do at all. Cyril has found a disturber of the peace. He must find this perpetrator, or the galaxy as we know it will collapse. So he finds out it was a Kenari male whose ship came from Ferrix. Uh-oh. Cassian, meanwhile, has since realized he will probably be a wanted man sometime soon, so he prudently goes to see his friend Bix Colleen, who, if you recall in my brief intro, he clearly has some history with. But Bix has long since seen the light and realized that Cassian is beautiful, but also too much of a mess to be husband material. I will say that definitely changes by the time we get to the Jyn Erso timeline. In my humble opinion, I'm just saying. Bix is a scrap mechanic and businesswoman. She doesn't have time for Cassian's antics. But she's also a dealer in the illicit Imperial tech trade, so it's only when Cass tells her he has something for her to sell that she deigns to listen to him. Honestly, girl, protect your peace. I'm on your side. Cassian has stolen an Imperial Starpath unit. It's some fancy piece of Imperial tech that is worth a ton of money on the black market, and he wants to sell it to a longtime contact of Bix's who's been buying stuff through her for a while. This is Cassian's way to raise a bunch of credits quickly so that he can buy a ship and lay low for a while until Morlana 1 forgets he's killed 2 of their employees. Which unfortunately is not happening now that Cyril Karn is on his tail. Let It Go? Cyril's never heard of that song. He was off-world when Frozen was in theaters. Anyway, Bix agrees to contact her buyer to see if he's interested in Cassian's stolen Imperial tech. Oh, by the way, her boyfriend Tim is around. He's just some guy. Unfortunately, he isn't as pretty as Cassian is, and I think he knows it because he does not like Cassian very much. There's this scene where Cassian and Tim are talking about Bix, and Cassian tells him he needs to find a less complicated woman. That's rich coming from the future Mr. Jyn Erso, but okay. So Bix goes to this other scrap dealer named Selman, asking for some random object, but really is code for, "I need to use your secret telephone that'll reach my shifty off-world contact." Tim, by the way, doesn't seem to know that his girlfriend is a black market seller and follows her around whenever she's doing her illicit dealings, so that's also fun. And the episode ends with Cyril sending out a message to Ferrix asking anyone if they know of a man from Kenari. So, yes, Cassian's really done it this time. Episode 2, That Would Be Me. Before we continue, I must mention the real MVP of Ferrix, clanging bell guy of the clock tower. Rain or shine, workday or not, war or peace, this guy has his earmuffs on and his hammers ready to wake everyone the hell up. An icon, what else is there to say? Cassian finally goes home to Marva, but like all mothers, she knows when her kid has been up to no good. Because Cyril's wanted message has reached basically everyone on Ferrix by now, and she is not pleased. She's wondering how the hell they even know Cassian is from Kenari, when she's been telling everyone he's from the planet Fest all these years. Cassian told them, actually. He told the madam at the brothel he was looking for a sister, who was from Kenari. Therefore, he must also be from Kenari. He messed up. I should mention that we've been getting some flashbacks to Cassian's childhood on Kenari here and there. We see him and his sister, who called him Casa, and they lived in a jungle in a tribe made up of mostly children? Yeah, I have questions. Where are any of the adults? Why does it seem like these children have been fending for themselves for some time now? Also, their language doesn't really sound like space Spanish, which to me seems like a missed opportunity, especially when you think about Cassian calling Jin endearments in Spanish in that voice of his. How can I make everything I see in Andor about Rebel Captain? I'm glad you asked. Anyway, we're told that Kenari was a mining planet occupied by the Empire until a toxic mining accident killed everyone there. But we're not told much else. It seems like everyone who was on Kenari met with some untimely end, and at some point Cassian got separated from his sister. So back to the present, now everyone on Ferrix is looking around for a human male from Kenari. At one point Cassian's friend Zan even asks him this, which further hastens his desire to leave Ferrix as soon as Bix's buyer shows up. Speaking of Bix, her jealous boyfriend Tim also has seen Cyril's message, and also knows Cassian happens to be from Kenari, so he answers the call. The traitor. And then Bix shows up that night at his house for a date and goes, "Is it too late?" "Why, yes, Bix, it is. It is too late, because your duplicitous current boyfriend has ratted out your ex-boyfriend to the cops already." I mentioned this before, and I'm gonna say it again. This is the first Star Wars that very blatantly alludes to sex. We actually get a sort of sex scene, which is insane to me. And then we get a morning after scene. Too bad it was between Bix and Tim, though. Could you imagine if we'd gotten this energy between Rey and Ben Solo in the sequel trilogy? I mean, it was absolutely there in the subtext, but could you imagine getting anything as blatant as this? People would have died. And by people, I mean me. Who knows, though? There's still time to put it in the upcoming Rey movie, if it ever gets made. Meanwhile, our favorite tryhard Cyril Karn has teamed up with this sergeant guy to physically go to Ferrix and find Cassian. Because of Tim's information, they now have a name and a face to go off of. God damn it, Tim, why couldn't you just be comfortable in your own skin? Bix was actually serious when she told you Cassian was the guy you shouldn't worry about. So Cyril and Sarge and some backup troops go to Ferrix. Sarge asks Cyril to give the troops a pep talk, which perplexes me a little because they're just going to arrest one guy. And Cyril is comically bad at saying words in front of a crowd. He's very smart, but public speaking is not his strong suit. Look at him. Poor baby is so in over his head. Luthen Rael has entered the chat. He's the contact Bix has reached out to, and he's here to buy Cassian's stolen part. Or so he says. Episode 3, Reckoning. We get another flashback scene to the past, this time from Marva's POV. This is the day she and her husband adopted Cassian. They were junk traders on Kenari looking for parts and ran into Cassian. Marva took one look at him and decided that's her son, actually. Like, that's literally her baby. So she drugged him and then took him off planet because apparently everyone on Kenari was about to die. Yeah, we still don't know exactly what happened with the whole Kenari thing. We're told a Republic ship is on the way and that Marva didn't want to leave Cassian there to die with the others. And that's it. That's all we know. Anyway, Luthen has arrived on the scene and looking very stylish, I must say. He takes this little space bus shuttle thing over to the town of Ferrix, which I love. It looks like a flying tram car. Luthen meets Bix, who tells him there's been some developments with Cassian since she called him. Namely, the fact that the cops are here looking for him because apparently he's a murderer. Cyril and the others, who the locals call the Corpos, raid Marva's home, which really upsets the locals because they see Marva as a good, upstanding woman, which is true, and is being wrongly harassed. And then the locals start loudly clanging on the metal in protest, which is deeply distracting for the corpos. I have to say, Cyril is not living, laughing, loving in his soldier uniform. He looks constipated every time we see his face. It almost seems like he's uncomfortable with carrying out the justice he so staunchly believes in. Or maybe he just doesn't like confrontation. Interesting either way. Biggs has since realized it was Tim who gave Cassian's identity away, since she was one of the 3 people who knew he was from Canary, and she knows she told Tim, so yeah, he's definitely sleeping on the couch tonight. Oh, never mind. Tim is shot dead. Oh no. Anyway, Tim was actually shot trying to stop Biggs from being arrested, even though he's the one who tipped them off. That should tell you something about the integrity of these corpos. Luthen, meanwhile, goes to meet Cassian. We find out that the Starpath unit he stole can trace Imperial coordinates within a certain radius, so that would probably come in handy for someone putting together a rebellious alliance of some sort. So Luthen goes, "Look, this thing you stole is cool, but I'm actually more interested in how you stole this thing." And Cassian's just like, "What? Like it's hard? I just walked in and took it. I just pretended I worked there or something. The Imperials are so arrogant that they don't notice these things." Except, notably, Cyril Karn. Luthen then goes, "Okay, listen, I didn't really come here for the Starpath unit. It would be nice to have, but I'm really here for you. Want to shake things up for real? Want to be a rebel?" There isn't really time for Cassian to ponder this, however, because the corpos find them. They're in this abandoned warehouse, and in what is honestly a really cool scene, Luthen and Cassian escape using a bunch of traps that Luthen placed everywhere. Luthen Rael, living in the year 3000 at all times. He's always a million steps ahead because that's the kind of person you need to be to successfully put together a rebellion right under a Sith Lord's nose. Cassian and Luthen also managed to tie up Cyril Karn, which is so funny because Cyril Karn's whole job was to do that to them. They also blow up a whole building full of corpo officers. Yeah, it's not looking good for my boy Cyril. He's been outsmarted by the very person he's been trying to arrest, and he's failed to capture him. And all Cyril has to show for it is a whole bunch of dead or injured officers. This episode ends with another flashback scene. This time it's Marva taking Casa away from Kenari, while also switching back and forth to present-day Cassian and Luthen leaving Ferrix. I thought this was a nice juxtaposition because both scenes are on a ship taking Cassian away to a new family and future. The past destination was Marva, her husband, and the people of Ferrix, and the future, as we know, will be the Rebel Alliance.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
Episode 4, Aldhani. Luthen sets a course for the planet Aldhani, while also trying to convince Cassian to join his fledgling rebellion. Cassian predictably refuses, because at this point in his life, he's seen too many horrors persisting. And he will also persist, but he would rather run and hide from said horrors. Can't say I blame him. I get it. But Luthen tells him you can only run so far. If you're going to die because of the Empire anyway, why not go down swinging? At least you won't have died for nothing. But Cassian still isn't convinced, so Luthen offers him a ton of money to join a group that's planning to steal the quarterly payroll for an entire Imperial sector. In short, he's offering Cassian money to go steal a lot more money. And Cassian's like, "Okay, yeah, I'll do it. For the money." Huh, interesting. I can think of at least one other character who started out helping the rebellion only for the money, but later decided, wait a minute. These guys kind of have a point, actually. Y'all good people, actually.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
We finally get the POV of the baddies in this episode, where our favorite fascist girly, Dedra Miro, is sitting in on an ISB meeting in their headquarters on Coruscant, where Major Partagaz, oh hello Qyburn, is leading a discussion on what the hell the Imperial Security Bureau even does. In his eyes, the ISB is a kind of healthcare provider. They're political healthcare workers trying to stop the disease of anti-imperial activity from spreading through the galaxy. But oddly enough, he's also not willing to believe that there's any widespread dissent without cold hard proof. Dedra, however, does think there's an organized rebellion out there, or there will be one very soon. She doesn't have the proof yet, but the vibes are off. Girly can tell. So Dedra goes to her fellow ISB officer Blevin and says, "Hey, I heard something happened on Ferrix. I had a Starpath unit that's gone missing but was found on Ferrix. I need the details of what happened there." But Blevin hates to see a corporate girly thriving and goes, "No, sweetie, no. You can't have that report. Ferrix is under my jurisdiction. Stay in your lane. Also, stop trying to outdo me. It's making me look bad." So Dedra here goes to Partagaz and is like, "Hey, my stolen Starpath unit was found on Ferrix. I think this is starting to be a pattern. We need to look into this. All of these individual events might look like they're isolated, but if you step back and look at the galaxy as a whole, they start to look much more like a coordinated effort. Partagaz still isn't convinced and tells her this in front of Blevin, which, look at him smirking because he thinks he's won. There's a very obvious misogynistic culture within the Empire, even in seemingly mundane places like the ISB, and it's so interesting to see a character like Dedra navigate that because we don't want the Empire to win, but we also want her to win. I found myself rooting for her despite the fact that she is the bad guy. Or maybe I just enjoy watching her girl bossing, I can't tell. Partagaz does take her aside and tells her that if she comes up with the proof that there is an organized rebellion, he will support her, while also acknowledging that she's a woman and that for her, there are more barriers to climb the ladder than, say, this fool. So hey, get me that evidence and that promotion is yours. Speaking of job security, our boy Cyril is not doing so hot. Because of the whole Ferrex fiasco, he, along with his superior and good old Sarge here, have basically been fired. So Cyril is unemployed and goes to his mother's house on Coruscant, which there's a lot to unpack there. Cassian and Luthen have landed on Aldhani, and unlike Cyril, Cassian actually has a job. He's agreed to do the mission. He goes by the name of Clem, which we later find out was his adopted dad's name, i.e. Marva's husband's name, and as a sort of down payment, Luthen gives Cassian a blue Kyber crystal necklace, which I loved because it's yet another parallel to Jyn Erso and her journey to the rebellion. It was such a nice callback to her Kyber necklace and how it brought her to the people that she would eventually call home, which pleased me greatly as a Rebel Captain stan. Kyber is a crystal that's attuned to the Force and was used to power lightsabers. It's extremely rare and valuable, especially now that the Jedi are gone, so the fact that Luthen gave this to him is pretty significant. Luthen asks Cassian to return it when the mission is done, but what he's really asking Cassian to do is to survive. And he's doing this to build that trust between them. Because to him, Cassian's a wild card who could potentially turn the tide in the struggle against the Empire. But to Cassian, Luthen is just some guy, so he has to be given something in order to be convinced that this is legit. It must be noted that Luthen himself is not going on this mission. He's got other schemes to plan elsewhere in the galaxy, but he'll be there in spirit. I'll talk more about this later, but Luthen is such an interesting character in the sense that he's behind so much of the rebellion, but most of his plans, especially the dangerous ones, are carried out by other people, and he knows this too. So Luthen leaves Cassian, or rather Clem, with our girl Vel. The mission to steal the money is in just a few days, so she isn't too pleased with having an extra guy join her team so late in the game. But Luthen is pretty stern on this, so in the end she doesn't have a choice other than to bring him on. Cassian's like, so how many of us are there? Vel's like, well, with you, 7. Sorry, what? You're planning on taking a whole garrison with 7 people? Why yes, that's the plan. Cassian kind of spirals a bit here because the job he took on is increasingly looking like a suicide mission, but money. And then we meet the rest of the group. We have Terramin, who is a former stormtrooper, Cinta is there, and cousin? Yep, Richie of the Bear. He decided he was done with the whole fine dining nonsense and decided to fight the man elsewhere. Also his name is Skeen. Yeah, I'd say he looks like a Skeen. We also have Nemik, who is the youngest and my favorite of the bunch. He is probably the only one who's nice to Cassian in the beginning, because none of them trust Cassian at first. And Luthen has forbidden Vel from telling them that he's in fact a hired mercenary, not because he's committed to the cause. Not yet, anyway. The plan is to break into the Imperial garrison, load entire vaults of money onto the only ship in the building that's big enough to hold all that money, and escape without too many people noticing. The problem is that the ship is slow and clunky, which will make a quick escape all but impossible, but they have nature on their side. The Eye of Aldhani is going to be happening on the day of the mission, which is a celestial event that happens every few years and is essentially a very colorful meteor shower. It's also tied to local customs and festivals, so the garrison will probably be mostly empty, as most of the guards will be outside watching the event. Vel's team also has a man on the inside, Lieutenant Gorn, who runs the garrison and has secretly defected to the rebellion. Lieutenant Gorn's story is probably the best example of how the anti-fascist call often comes from inside the house. Apparently, he'd fallen in love with a local Aldani woman who the Empire killed and then had him demoted as a result. Yeah, I don't think doing all that to someone would keep them sympathetic to your side, really. As Vel later tells Cassian, everyone has their own rebellion, their own reason to hate the Empire. Now the challenge is to unite them under one cause, but that's Luthen's job. Mon Mothma has entered the chat being Luthen's fancy shop on Coruscant. Yeah, Luthen is having his own little Hannah Montana double life moment here. He actually dons a wig and a whole different personality whenever he's on Coruscant, cosplaying as an antique artifacts dealer. Mon enters the shop under the guise of buying something for her husband, but once they're out of earshot, Luthen starts asking the important questions. Like, are you gonna come through with the money you've promised us? And by us, I mean the rebellion? The thing about Mon Mothma is that at this point, she is still serving as the Chandrilan senator. She's a public figure, a rich one, who comes from an aristocratic family. She has both wealth and status. In other words, she has the most to lose. But she also believes in a galaxy free from the Empire's oppression and tyranny. She wants to stand up for the people. So funneling money into the rebellion is one way she can do both, be a smiling politician in front of the Empire, while helping to take it down behind closed doors. But cracks are starting to show, both in her public life and her personal one. The Empire is starting to look into people's bank accounts, making it hard for Mon to move large sums over to the rebellion without it looking suspicious. They've also planted someone from the ISB as her personal driver to keep tabs on her. And at home, Mon is increasingly becoming estranged from her husband Perrin and her daughter Lita, because Perrin clearly doesn't have the same political views she does. At one point, he organizes this dinner party at their home on Coruscant, which, by the way, is the Chandrilan embassy, and honestly, one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars real estate ever. Seriously, their home is so beautiful. If they ever do an MTV Cribs-esque type show for Star Wars, please include the Chandrilan embassy, and also the entire planet of Naboo, please and thank you. You know, I've said Andor is one of the best written Star Wars we've ever gotten, but it's also one of the best looking. Like, it looks so expensive and beautiful and feels like this galaxy far, far away could be a real place that exists. And I love that so much. You can just tell that a lot of care went into the set design and the cinematography and costuming. Anyway, Perrin's invited the same people who keep trying to undo her policies in the Senate and are currently trying to cut off shipping lanes to a number of planets so that those people end up starving. This includes the Gormans, which I'll touch on later. Mon is very upset by this, but Perrin seems completely unbothered, so that's fun. But at least he's seated her on the other end of the table, the boring end, as he calls it, because Mon's not fun, apparently. Perrin, my guy, if only you knew how unboring your wife really is when she isn't around you. Your luscious locks of hair would fall right off. You would be bald. So Mon says to Luthen, I'm trying to get my money to you. And Luthen goes, well, try harder. Because even if you don't come through, we have other prospects. Episode 5, The Axe Forgets. We briefly get a glimpse of Cyril's unemployed era living with his mother. I love his mom's apartment. It's such an interesting blend of like 60s retro vibes, but futuristic at the same time. Cyril's mother is so incredible. She keeps feeding him these grand, nutritious breakfasts of blue milk and like galactic Cocoa Puffs while also complaining that he's ruined his career and has no prospects. He is Charlotte from the 2005 Pride and Prejudice. So true. So Mama Karn here is going to call in a favor from good old Uncle Harlow. He'll give Cyril a good, honest job for sure. Do we ever find out who this Uncle Harlow is? No. But I do have my theories. We are also introduced to Mon's daughter Lita, who I kid you not hates her mother's guts. Lita has such a passive-aggressive reply to every single thing Mon says to her. It's actually kind of horrifying to watch this charismatic senator be verbally decimated by a teenager. And Perrin, of course, is no help. He's just here to watch with popcorn. I love how in this scene Mon is seated so far from both her husband and daughter. Just a really good representation of how increasingly isolated she's becoming from her family due to her choices. Meanwhile, Cassian has joined the team on Aldani. None of them are pleased that he's there, but they are quickly learning that Cassian does in fact add value to the mission. Like, Cassian gives suggestions here and there and clearly is knowledgeable about how the Imperials work. There's a lot of preparation going on for the mission itself, which becomes difficult at times because TIE fighters will randomly come swooping down over the valley that they're in. They're so loud. Oh my god. I'm pretty sure I've grievously injured my eardrums while watching this with headphones on. Side note, Aldani is also very beautiful. I certainly wouldn't mind an MTV Cribs episode of this planet as well. It's very green, full of forests and rivers and valleys. A lot of the landscape was shot in Scotland, which as a Scotland stan I was very happy about. The Imperial Garrison is also a real place. It's actually this dam in Scotland. Not even going to try and pronounce that name, but I thought that was really cool. Cassian and the others are posing as local shepherds, wearing Aldani clothes so that they blend in. But whenever a TIE fighter goes by, they still scramble to hide their weapons, which is as simple as throwing a wool blanket over a pile of guns. Gotta cover your tracks somehow. Nemik has taken a liking to Cassian. I love Nemik. He is probably the most committed to the cause, and according to Cousin here, sees oppression everywhere. Nemik's also written a manifesto, some of which he explains to Cassian, and drops this banger of a line.
The pace of repression outstrips our ability to understand it, and that is the real trick of the Imperial thought machine. It's easier to hide behind 40 atrocities than a single incident.
Nemik, and by Nemik I really mean Tony Gilroy, has basically summed up how fascism works in 3 sentences. Andor is full of these really incredible lines, and this is one of them. Fascism has always thrived on inflicting horrors at breakneck speed because it doesn't give the people any chance to even breathe, let alone rise up against it. We've seen that throughout our own world history, and we're seeing it now today. But you know what? The horrors persist, and so do I. Cousin finds out Cassian's been carrying a really expensive blue Kyber necklace and exposes him in front of God and everyone. Who brings a treasure to a robbery? Because yeah, why are you carrying a stone worth 50,000 credits? Who are you really? So Cassian does the one thing Luthen told him not to do, which is to tell the truth. Cassian admits that he's paid to be here, which nobody except Vel knew, and that certainly doesn't make any of them feel better. But Cassian also admits that he's scared, that they're all scared, but he's not going to lose his nerve, and neither should they. Ah, now we're starting to see a glimmer of the Captain Andor we all know and love. He's in there somewhere. Meanwhile, Dedra does some digging and becomes convinced that there's an organized rebellion out there. It's too random to be random, as her assistant puts it. Watch your back, Luthen, she's closing in on you. And back on Coruscant, Perrin finds out that Mon has started a charitable quote-unquote foundation of some sort. The foundation being the downfall of Emperor Palpatine, but you know, she keeps that bit to herself. Perrin's like, why didn't you tell me about this foundation of yours? And she's like, well, I didn't think you'd be interested, since it's a charitable endeavor. Oh my god, Mon! The shade! And then Perrin tells the driver to take the expressway back. We've reached astronomical levels of pettiness. Episode 6, The Eye. We have reached the day of the mission. Nemik admits to Cassian that he couldn't sleep, even though he has something to believe in. He has the cause, as opposed to Cassian, who sleeps like a stone and believes in nothing. And Cassian looks so deeply offended at this, it's so funny. Let's talk real quick about the Imperials and the people of Aldani. The Empire has decided that this planet is of strategic importance, so they've been slowly expanding their operations there, uprooting the locals and pushing them further and further out of their ancestral lands. The Imperials look down upon them and think all of their traditions are nonsense. However, the area where the garrison was built is sacred to the Dani people, and they've used the valley to view the Eye for generations. And so, to keep the peace, the Imperials let the locals come to the valley to watch the Eye, but they're not happy about it. And I'll bet the Donnies are even less happy, seeing as they've been forced to leave their land and all, but I digress. There's one scene where the garrison commandant is meeting with the local Donnie elder, and Lieutenant Gorn is purposefully mistranslating every single word he's saying, because this elder wants the Empire to burn like the meteors they're about to see in the sky. Yet another icon. We love to see it. So Cassian and the others sneak into the garrison while all this is going on, and the mission ends up being successful. They end up stealing 80 million credits, but not everyone makes it. Lieutenant Gorn and Terramin are shot dead, and Nemik is fatally wounded, which I was so sad to see because I really wanted him to live to see the rebellion become the massive uprising that he dreamed it would be. It hurts even more because he was so young too. Also, before I move off the Aldani plot, I really loved the visuals in this episode. The eye scene is so stunning and colorful. It really looks like something magical straight from the Dani people's folklore. Speaking of the Dani people, I'm pretty sure this rebel attack has effectively ruined their lives. because the Imperials will probably use this as an excuse to commit even more atrocities against them, and I think Luthen knows that too. So Cassian flies what's left of the group out of there, and they get Nemec to a doctor, but unfortunately he doesn't make it. And Skeen! He ended up being a complete fraud who was only there for the 80 million credits and not the cause. Cousin! How could you?
I was rooting for you! We were all rooting for you!
Cassian shoots him dead before that can happen. He may be a mercenary in this scenario, but he still has a moral compass. He's only here for the money Luthen promised him, and nothing more. Which is what he tells Vel when she asks, "Hey, what happened? Where's Skeen?" He also gives the blue Kyber crystal back to Vel so that she can return it to Luthen, because he's getting the hell out of here. After all, the Aldhani mission was just a job. It doesn't have to mean anything more, right? Right? Meanwhile, the news of the Aldhani heist reaches everyone on the holonet, including Mon Mothma, who is literally on the Senate floor when she hears of it, and also Luthen in his shopkeeper getup. And when he hears what happened, he lets himself have a little chuckle of relief, but also a deep, steadying breath, because there is no going back from this. The real rebellion begins now. Episode 7, Announcement. By now, the Empire has also realized what's happened, and the ISB calls an emergency meeting where they announce some pretty drastic counters to rebellious activity, including but not limited to an enormous tax on worlds that are against the Empire, and allowing the ISB access to the Empire's full military to go after anyone they deem criminal. This is actually the first time Palpatine is directly mentioned. Clearly, Aldhani was big enough to catch his attention. So now the Empire is essentially cracking down hard on any anti-imperial activity, however small, which is exactly what Luthen wanted, as he tells Mon when she comes running over to his shop demanding to know if Aldhani was his doing, and all he says is, well, revolutions are expensive. I mean, yeah, I guess that's true. Mon is shooketh that he's actually done something so crazy loco bananas, but Luthen argues that this is exactly what the rebellion needs. Both the money they stole and the Empire's overreaction to the whole thing. And also, Mon was being too slow in coming through with her funding, so there's that. They need the Empire to start showing its true colors as a ruthless regime, because until now they've been taking the slow and steady approach. They've been going so slow, in fact, that most people haven't noticed their rights and freedoms steadily being leached away. The rebellion can't hide forever, so you better work, Mon. I loved this entire exchange between Mon and Luthen. It's very much Mon realizing the true stakes of what she's gotten herself into, because she's chosen a side, and that side has decided to reveal itself, at least in some fashion. And now she must do the same thing, but it's going to cost her more than just her money. So Mon invites an old friend from Chandrila to yet another fancy dinner party at her house. His name is Tay Kolma, he's a banker, and he's known Mon since childhood. An old flame, perhaps? Perrin certainly seems to think so, since he keeps throwing daggers at Tay whenever he looks in their direction. But I do want to talk about Mon's conversation with Tay here because it's so well done. She keeps telling him to smile and pretend they're having the most innocent of conversations while dropping absolute bombshells about her true political beliefs. Because Tay, like literally everyone else, assumes Mon Mothma aligns with the Empire, or at least is willing to cooperate with them. And Tay, like more and more people every day now, is seeing the Empire for what it really is, and doesn't want Palpatine in power. But she very politely and firmly tells Tay that she's learned a thing or two from Palpatine, actually.
I show you the stone in my hand. You miss the knife at your throat.
Mon confides in Tay Kolma because she knows he's against the Empire, and probably is one of the only people in her circle who is. She tells him about how the ISB is watching her, how her accounts are essentially frozen, but she stops short of telling him exactly what she's been up to. Well, she does tell him indirectly by parroting his earlier words, or perhaps you find my politics a bit strong for your taste. I love that Tay looks increasingly gobsmacked that he's completely misread her this whole time, and Mon just keeps telling him to just smile and wave, boy. Just smile and wave. Incredible television. So Tay secretly agrees to be the chairman of her new charitable quote-unquote foundation, so we can find a way to help her move money without drawing imperial attention. Meanwhile, Cyril's uncle Harlow has come through with that family favor. He gets Cyril a boring desk job at some imperial bureau, And I gotta say, he looks comically out of place even here, because no one understands that he needs to find the murderer Cassian Andor. He needs to bring justice to the galaxy. Meanwhile, Cassian returns to Ferrix under cover of darkness and goes to find Bix, who tells him that he can't stay here anymore. People blame him for what just happened with Cyril and all, and he can see that Bix blames him too, in her own way. So he hands her the money that he owes to everyone on Ferrix and says his goodbyes. And the next stop is Marva, because he wants to take her with him. But Marva doesn't want to run. The events of Aldhani have woken something up in her, and even though she's probably too old to actually fight, the least she can do is stay and help, because the Imperials will be there no matter where they run. The only place the Empire can't be is in her mind, so there's no point in physically trying to escape. It's so interesting to watch Cassian's face when she mentions Aldhani and how brave the rebels who did it must have been. She has no idea that her son had any part in it, and he never tells her. What's so ironic about this conversation is that Marva tells him she doesn't expect him to understand the whole Aldhani thing. It's ironic because he was actually physically there carrying out that mission. He was acting in service of the rebellion, but Cassian still doesn't see it that way. Aldhani was just a robbery. He still sees the rebellion as a hopeless endeavor, and that he can somehow outrun the Empire, even as it continues to spread throughout the galaxy. Marva tells him to go on without her. Be at peace somewhere, like on a beach or something. He's like, but how can I leave you here? I can't be at peace. I'll be worried about you all the time. And then Marva just smiles and goes, that's just love. Nothing you can do about that. People cried. And by people, I mean me. Cassian can't stay, and Marva can't go. So they must part. I should mention that we got a flashback to how Cassian's father Clem died. He was killed by Imperials and hanged in the town square for everyone to see. Yeah. Depression. I should also mention that a younger Cassian tried to attack the stormtroopers in response to them hanging his father, but was subsequently arrested. I wonder if that's the source of his despondency when confronted with rising up against the Empire. It would explain a lot. Meanwhile, Dedra has been doing some more digging into Ferrix, which she technically isn't supposed to be doing, as Ferrix is under Blevin's command, and Blevin tries to publicly embarrass her once again, but this time she has the data Partagaz was looking for. She can now prove a link between missing Imperial tech and their distribution to rebel groups across the galaxy. So Blevin is essentially demoted, and Ferrix is now under Dedra's control. Look at him, he got so played. Girl power! Partagaz even congratulates her, but also tells her to watch her back. Probably for the best, because that man is not happy. Blevin is out for blood. Cassian has left Ferrix and gone to, you guessed it, a tropical planet with a beach and a nice sunset. Yeah, I'm going to think every beach scene now is a reference to Scarif. Sorry. Why am I like this? Only God knows. He also goes by the name of Keith, which is a fugly name, by the way. Or at least that's what he told this girl he met at the all-inclusive club the last night. Cassian is clearly just aggressively trying to forget everything that's happened to him ever. He's just thrown himself into a new place, a new identity, and new people, trying to outrun his past and the Empire. But the one thing you can never outrun is destiny. And destiny meets him on the way to the store, where he's arrested, just for being there and looking suspicious doing so. Also, I thought this droid was K2 for a hot second, and I started to get so excited for their meet cute, but no, it was just a regular Imperial droid. Tony Gilroy, if you're watching this, just know that I'm still sitting here waiting for it. 3 years later. Don't let me down, Tony. I love that Cassian can't even go to the store without somehow getting into trouble with the law. It really do be like that sometimes. Or all the time, in his case. He's sentenced to 6 years of manual labor, along with a bunch of others, none of whom can be called criminals. They're mostly just tourists who were rounded up simply for being at the wrong place at the wrong time, just like him. Episode 8, Narkina 5. Cyril is summoned by Dedra Miro for 2 reasons. 1, he keeps submitting requests for data on Cassian Andor, who he still thinks is public enemy number 1, and 2, because he happened to be the one behind the disaster of a mission on Ferrix, therefore he can provide Dedra with some valuable information. I was complaining earlier about not having the Cassian K2 meet cute, but this scene is absolutely a meet cute, because Cyril has finally found someone who is as insane as he is. And the look on his face says it all. Cyril tells her that Cassian was the one who stole her Starpath unit and killed the 2 men on Morlana 1, but he also had an accomplice, which is Luthen, who was there to buy the Starpath. Cyril also defends his actions on Ferrix and his role because he was just trying to do his job. It's not his fault that his superior was lazy and also incompetent. Cyril knows he was good at his job too, which is why he offers to help track down Cassian to get to his accomplice. But Dedra here is a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, so she dismisses him and tells him to forget that the whole Ferrix thing ever happened. Good luck with that, considering that this is Cyril you're talking to. This man neither forgives nor forgets. I aspire to be that way, actually. This way no one crosses you. So, using Cyril's information, Dedra provides her findings to the ISB leader, who, by the way, looks like he would rather be literally anywhere else than listen to some woman prattle on, which is clearly an intimidation tactic on his part because, again, Dedra is the only woman in this room. Misogyny. But Dedra drops the bombshell claim that Cassian Andor's accomplice, who she's named Axis, is central to an organized rebel effort because he's been linked to purchases of stolen Imperial tech across the galaxy. She asks for funding to go to Ferrix and set up surveillance there to listen in on all communications to and from the main city, and because Partagaz supports her, she gets the money. Partagaz? Probably the only one in that room who drinks Respect Women juice. Well, him and maybe one other person. More on that later. Cassian is sent to Narkina 5, which is an Imperial prison factory smack in the middle of an ocean. Everyone is made to take off their shoes and get on program. Yeah, whoever designed this prison was a little too into the floor is lava game, because that is the entire point of this facility. The floor is literally electrified to zap anyone at any time, and it can be set to kill, which is why all the Gestapo guards wear these clunky protective boots. And because they have these hot floors, the cells don't even need doors, because they could die if they just leave their cell at any time. All the prisoners are put to work building some sort of Imperial machinery, so it's just endless hours of manual labor until they die. And to add an extra layer of fun, the prisoners are assigned to teams and then made to compete against each other to produce the most parts. The teams that have the lowest productivity are zapped within an inch of their lives or killed. And the grand prize for being the most productive is flavored slop for dinner as opposed to tasteless slop. And also not dying, so that's a nice perk. Andy Serkis is in a Star Wars again, this time playing a fellow prisoner instead of a pickled Palpatine puppet. His name is Kino Loy, and he's the floor manager of Cassian's group of prisoners. He's harsh because he has to be, or they'll all be killed, but he does care about his men and wants to keep them alive. And morale is low enough as it is. There's a scene where one of the prisoners commits suicide just by stepping out of his cell in the middle of the night. It's honestly quite dark. Cassian is low-key having a meltdown watching all of this. You just know he's concocting an absolutely unhinged plan to get out of there. Also, Melshi is here. He was also in Rogue One. So this prison is his and Cassian's meet cute. We love to see it. Meanwhile, at House Mothma, Take Homa has been coming over regularly as the chairman of her quote-unquote foundation, and Perrin is positively thrilled. By the way, we find out that Mon and Perrin were married at like 15, so Chandrila believes in child marriage. Cool. I will point out that neither Mon nor Perrin appear to support this. It's just something that happened to them, and now they must deal with each other forever. Also, can I just talk about these little worm things they're drinking? They're dropping them live into their drinks and it turns them into something fizzy and bubbly. I love little details like this. I think they add so much. Apparently it's a traditional Chandrilan drink, but it's yet another tradition that Mon has lost her taste for. In addition to the whole child marriage thing, Tay has come to tell Mon that Imperial auditors are now being set up at banks everywhere, so there is no other place to move her money. So now she has a 400k hole in her accounts for which she has to come up with an explanation for or cover up before the Imperials find it. 400k seems awfully light to me compared to 80 million credits that Luthen now has, so no wonder he decided to do something as drastic as Aldhani. Speaking of the Aldhani crew, Vel and Cinta have come to Ferrix to wait for Cassian to come home, because Luthen wasn't planning on Cassian leaving the rebellion the way he did. So now Cassian's a loose end that must be tied up and permanently silenced. Vel and Cinta's relationship is so interesting because they clearly care about each other and want to be together, but there is the cause, and that must always come first. I think Cinta comes to this realization quite easily, but it's much harder for Vel because she's actually a rich girl running away from her family, as Cinta puts it. More on that later. Marva, meanwhile, has fallen ill. Apparently, she collapsed while exploring the tunnels underneath the main square so that, quote unquote, the rebellion can sneak in. And neither Bix nor Brasso seems to know what that means. Bix calls Luthen's shop on Coruscant using that secret telephone in a desperate bid to find Cassian and tell him that Marva is ill. But Luthen's assistant Clea refuses to answer the phone because she's convinced the ISB are listening in. And they definitely are, because Dedra finds out Bix called and captures both her and Salman. Clea here is probably the most stone-cold rebel we've met so far, other than maybe Cinta. The rebellion comes before even her own humanity, and I think that's something Luthen himself is still kind of grappling with. And she's fully aware of this. She's like, Luthen, you're slipping. Get it together, or else the whole rebellion will be over before it even begins. So Luthen goes to meet Saw Gerrera in an effort to get him to unite with his rebel groups in exchange for some stolen Imperial tech. But Saw refuses because he's an anarchist, as we saw in Rogue One, and he doesn't think the different rebel groups have enough in common to work together. He and Luthen also have kind of a funny exchange regarding Aldhani. Saw asks Luthen if he was the one behind it, but then Luthen plays so coy and asks him the same exact thing. It's kind of like a Spider-Man meme moment happening here. Luthen clearly holds a lot of cards close to his chest, which works a lot in his favor, but I have to wonder about the mental toll that it takes on him. Just constantly having to keep track of who knows what information. I know I'd crack. Like an egg. Episode 9. Nobody's listening. Dedra has tortured poor Salman and is now doing the same thing to Bix. But Bix is refusing to talk because she knows Dedra won't believe anything she says. Dedra, I love her, but she is quite terrifying when she's torturing someone. She's just so unfeelingly intense. Dedra wants to know who this Axis person is, and the best way to find him is to find Cassian. But my girl Bix won't give anything away, even after seeing the wreck that Salman is in after being tortured. Bix is such a minor character here, but she's obviously a big part of Cassian's life. She's close to Marva and sees her like a mother. And Cassian, she may not be in love with him anymore, but she still loves him, and she's willing to give up her sanity to protect him. Because this torture seems to be more mental than physical. This Imperial Dr. Mengele here makes her listen to the screams of some alien species, which apparently can damage her mind permanently. This is the kind of love that Cassian inspires from his people on Ferrix. It seems that even if he lets them down, they're still going to do everything they can to keep him safe. It's so heartwarming and so sad to see at the same time, because you want to hope that nothing bad ever happens to any of them. So nobody actually knows where Cassian is at this point. And meanwhile, Cassian and some other prisoners are planning, well, a rebellion. Or at least breaking out of prison. Kino Loy, though, is not on board. For two reasons. One, because he thinks the guards will discover their plans, which Cassian flatly goes, well, no, that's not true. Nobody's listening to us. They don't care enough. They have those hot floors to keep us in line, and they don't think they need anything else. The other reason Kino hesitates is that he only has a few shifts left before his prison term is up. He thinks he's going to walk free soon. But as they all find out, that is no longer true. Ever since Aldhani, the Empire has turned all sentences into life sentences. It's ironic because this is the crackdown that Luthen was hoping for, but the guy who helped cause that crackdown is now caught in the crossfire. And Cassian, for his part, seems to realize this, that he actually did play a part in bringing all of this upon himself and his fellow prisoners. And I think this episode is where we really see Cassian's caring side come out. He covers for Olaf, one of the oldest prisoners who can't keep up, and who eventually dies just before his term is up. And now no one's getting out. And Kino is shocked because he really did believe that if he stayed in his lane and followed the rules, that everyone would be set free eventually. But no. And now the word's gotten out, and the guards killed an entire group of prisoners for it. I loved Kino's journey in this episode, that we got the progression of going from a dutiful, law-abiding prisoner to actually seeing the idea of rebellion dawning on his face. Just him realizing that the Imperials will do whatever they want to them, whether they follow the rules or not. Cyril has been promoted from his boring desk job to a slightly less boring desk job. Mama Karn is positively thrilled to hear this, but she still feeds him space Cocoa Puffs for breakfast? I don't know, doesn't a promotion at least deserve panna cake slathered in bantha butter? And pop tree syrup? Cyril goes and waits for Dedra to come out after work to thank her for the promotion, which he insists wasn't her doing. He is definitely, into Dedra. It's so funny to watch. He's coming on just a tad too strongly for her liking, though. He's like, we both want the same thing. And, I know he's talking about Cassian, but are we still talking about Cassian? Because it sounds like something very different to me. Dedra is like an animal backed into a corner. She snarls at him to back off, or she'll have him exiled to the Outer Rim. Girlie, I don't think you're fooling anyone. I just don't. I saw that flicker of interest in your eyes. We find out Vel is more than just a rich girl. She's a Chandrilan rich girl, and she's Mon Mothma's cousin. And they both know that the other is involved in the rebellion. During dinner with Mon's family, Perrin looks at Vel and goes, "So, when are you going to find a husband?" And Mon just has this little smile on her face. She's a lesbian herald. Get on program. Vel leaves afterward, reminding Mon that they've chosen a side, so it's all or nothing. There's also this cool shot of Mon where she's framed in the middle of the curved doorway, and together they form the Rebel Alliance Starboard. Just again, reiterating Mon as someone who stands apart from most of the people in her circle because she's chosen a different side. But at this point, she's the only one who knows it, so that's what alienates her. And I like that we can see that through the camera work. So Tay Kolma meets with Mon and says, "Look, you need to fill this 400k gap in your accounts with something, otherwise it's going to look like it all vanished into the Force a la Yoda, and therefore look suspicious. And the only way to do that is through a loan from Davos Skulden, a wealthy and influential Chandrilan banker." And Mon's like, "But this guy's a thug," which Tay agrees is probably true, but they're running out of options. Mon doesn't have any other choice but to agree to meet him. And finally, Dedra's group has tracked down a pilot who was smuggling stolen Imperial tech. They torture this pilot and find out that he's part of a rebel group led by Anto Krieger, and that Anto is planning a raid on an Imperial power station at Spellhouse. So Partagaz goes, "Well, we'll be there waiting for him." Episode 10, One Way Out. We've come to what is probably my favorite episode, although let's be real, all of the episodes have been favorites so far. Cassian tells Kino, "Hey, we need to leave tomorrow, or we'll die in this prison." And there's no better opportunity than tomorrow because the prison is low on guards at the moment, and they're also afraid of their own prisoners. After all, they just killed 100 men who found out they're never going to get out of here. Cassian really comes into his own here. This is the moment he decides, you know what, screw it, he's going to fight back. He'd rather die fighting them than giving them what they want. Which is exactly what Luthen first told him when he was trying to get him to join the Aldhani mission, and what Marva had said before they parted ways on Ferrix. Cassian had dismissed it both times, but not anymore. So Kino finally agrees. He finally takes his destiny back from the hands of the Empire. He rallies the other men to the cause, because there's only one way out of here, and that is to fight. One way out. And we all cheered. And so they break out of prison, first by flooding a bathroom so that the electric floors don't work anymore. And because the floors are no longer lava, the guards are pretty quickly overwhelmed. As always, Cassian is a good shot with a blaster, but now it's with steel in his spine and purpose in his soul. My little baby off to destroy people. Cassian and Kino break into the control room because they need to spread the word to the other prisoners that there's a prison break going on and the floors aren't lava anymore. And then Cassian hands the mic over to Kino, because it has to be him that says it. He's the one that can inspire everyone to fight back. And there's this moment of hesitation, but then he looks at Cassian and gathers the strength he needs. He knew what had to be done, and he had the strength to do it. I just had to include that in there. Everyone in the building, the prisoners, the Imperial guards, hears Kino's message. He tells them the truth about how the Empire was never going to let them out, so their only chance at freedom is to fight. So they do. I loved everything about this scene, but especially this moment where Kino quotes Cassian's own words during his speech, and Cassian has just such a look of pride on his face. I was so emotional watching this. Cassian's become such a leader over the past few episodes. He really is becoming the character that we fell in love with in Rogue One. So the prisoners managed to break out of the building, but the only way to freedom is to swim, because they're surrounded by oceans on all sides. And Kino can't swim! I don't think Kino actually survived because we never see him again, and I'm sad about that. But he died on his own terms and not in shackles, And that's all anyone can hope for in the era of the Empire. We briefly get a glimpse of Marva, who isn't doing so well. She's going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, space Cocoa Puffs, hiding her medications so she doesn't have to take them. Mon, meanwhile, meets Davos Skulden, who looks exactly the way you'd picture an obscenely rich space banker. He has one of those voices that's trying to be charming, but just grates on your ears instead. Mon is so not in the mood to play his games, though. It's so funny. So Davo tells her, yes, he can help her, no problem. Mon goes, okay, cool, name your price. Unfortunately, though, he doesn't want her money in exchange for his services. He wants Lita. He wants Lita for his 14-year-old son, because child marriage is cool, actually. Mon refuses to entertain this and basically has Tay kick him out, but Davo tells her she's lying, because they both know he's her only way out of this mess. Yikes! So within the ISB, there's an officer named Lonnie. It's this ginger man with a mustache. And he goes to Luthen after Dedra discovers the raid planned by Anto Krieger's group. Yes, that's right, Luthen isn't the only Hannah Montana in the show. I'd actually argue Lonnie is the most Hannah Montana of them all, because unlike Luthen, he's living a double life 24/7, acting as an ISB officer in his day job while spying on the Empire for the rebellion. So Lonnie hasn't seen Luthen in a long time, but once he finds out that the ISB is planning to ambush Andrew Krieger's raid at Spellhouse, he goes to meet him. He takes the dankest elevator you've ever seen in your life down to the underworld of Coruscant, where Luthen is waiting for him. Luthen, as always, knows every single thing about everyone at all times. He knows Lonnie's wife just gave birth to a daughter, and he's like, congratulations on becoming a dad. That's exciting. Lonnie's like, are you trying to scare me with this? The fact that you know every single thing going on in my personal life? Because it's working. Lonnie tells him about how Dedra is on his tail, she's trying to find Cassian in an effort to get to him, and about the ambush at Spellhouse, and how the Empire has been cracking down on all criminal activity ever since Aldhani, which, by the way, Luthen, was that you? Oh, no. We were invited to join, but we sat that one out. Again, Luthen's on this strategy of tell no one nothing. That's a lot for one person to carry. Anyway, Luthen says we can't tell Andor Krieger the ISB knows of his plans. We have to let him be ambushed by them, because right now the ISB thinks Anto is the extent of the rebellion. And if Luthen tells Anto, he's going to call the raid off, which means the ISB will know someone within their ranks snitched. And then whose life will be at risk? Lonnie's. The choice is painful but clear. They have to sacrifice Anto and his men to protect the rebellion and Lonnie's role as a double agent. So Lonnie is caught in this impossible situation, and he wants out. That's the real reason he called this meeting. He wants to leave both the Empire and the Rebellion somewhere where neither side can reach him and his new little family. But as we saw with Cassian, this is a delulu concept to have, because there is no outrunning the Empire anymore. And Luthen reminds Lonnie that he's only gotten so high up in the ISB because of the Rebellion and the effort Luthen personally has put into making his career successful. So Lonnie is well and truly trapped. So Lonnie goes, do you not care at all about what I've sacrificed? What have you sacrificed? And here we get what is probably the most memorable monologue to come from the show. I watched this 3 years ago now, and it's the one thing that I've remembered word for word because it just sent chills down my spine. Luthen says, of course I care. I care about you all the time. But what have I sacrificed? Joy, friendship, kindness, inner peace, because he has to use the same depraved tools his enemy uses to defeat them. And in doing so, his sense of right and wrong has blurred to such a degree that he can never go back to the person he was before the rebellion. He can't sleep at night because of how all of his actions weigh on his soul. He burns his decency and his life for a sunrise he'll never get to see.
So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
And Lonnie is shooketh to the bone after hearing this. We all were. This was such a magnificent piece of writing, and Stellan Skarsgård's line delivery is so good here. He keeps his voice level just until the end, where he says he's given up everything, and that last line just rings so loudly in your ears, and you as the audience understand the gravity of what he sacrificed. At this point, Luthen has nothing left to give except the time he has left. Not even in the palace of his own mind is he free from what he's done and what he has to do still. When he says he shares his dreams with ghosts, he's talking about everyone who has died fighting with him against the Empire and those who will die in the future. He carries all of them with him. Just such a powerful, haunting speech. This is television. Nay, this is cinema. So Luthen tells Lonnie he needs him to stay. He needs heroes like him to bring that future sunrise to fruition. And then we cut away to Cassian and Melshi, who have made it to shore alive many hours after escaping prison, who just so happen to be two people who will eventually bring down the Empire and become heroes themselves. So that was some masterful editing. I see what y'all did there. Episode 11, Daughter of Ferrix. Marva has died. We don't actually see her die, but a local women-led group called the Daughters of Ferrix come to take her body away. B2 Emo is so sad that Marva's gone. He didn't want her to be taken away. It broke my heart to see that because he just can't fathom that she's gone. Like, the concept just isn't there. He asks Brazo to stay with him because he just doesn't want to be alone. He's just so cute and he just wants to be loved. I'll adopt you, B. The news of Marva's death reaches Dedra. Her team tells her the Phyrexians want to have a big public funeral for her since Marva was such a big part of society there. Everyone knew her and loved her. The funeral is in 2 days and she's going to be bricked, which means being cremated and your ashes mixed into cement and you're literally turned into a brick, which is then placed into a wall. I thought this was an interesting custom and seemed very fitting for a place like Ferrix, which looks to be made of like mud and stone, very earthy. Dedra wants this funeral to happen because there's a good chance that Cassian is going to turn up to say goodbye to Marva, so she tells her officers to allow it because this is as good of a lure as any for him to return to Ferrix. Bix has been tortured by Dedra's Dr. Mengele, and she is in pretty bad shape, in all honesty. Dedra asks her if the contact she introduced to Cassian, aka Axis, is Anto Krieger, but Bix can't even muster a coherent response. She is literally in shambles. I'm sad. She's just a girl. She doesn't deserve this. Meanwhile, Vel has come to Luthen's antique shop, but he isn't there. Clea is, though. She's super happy to see her. Actually, she is extremely mad that Vel's taken the risk of showing up here. Clea runs such a tight ship. She takes no shite from anyone. But I don't know, she might want to show a little bit more kindness, or just any ounce of humanity in general. Might be good for morale. Vel is here to tell Clea that Marva's died, and that she wants Luthen to know that the intel came from her and Cinta. She's going to take the credit she deserves, thank you very much. She did, after all, give them Aldani's 80 million credits. Vel also goes to visit Mon again, and Lita has a bunch of friends over, but not for a fun slumber party. They're here to learn traditional Chandrilan chants from an elder. Vel is horrified. She's like, was all this traditional nonsense Perrin's idea? And Mon goes, nope, it was Lita's. Mon, however, does admit that she's had to take a marriage proposal for Lita because, as she so eloquently puts it, she's in so much trouble. Mon tells Vel everything, how her accounts are frozen, and the only way she can avoid exposing herself and the rebellion is to take a loan from Davo, and also a son-in-law. Mon mentions that her money especially became impossible to move after Aldani, and Vel very pointedly looks away when she says this. Yeah, Mon still doesn't know that Vel was behind Aldani. It'd be interesting to see her reaction, so I hope we get to see that in season 2. I also find it interesting that Lita and her friends are so into the very same quote-unquote outdated traditions and viewpoints that their parents seem to despise. I have to wonder if it's a commentary on how we're seeing younger generations, like Gen Z and younger, lean increasingly into conservatism and restoring the old ways and making things great again, and how they idolize the past while at the same time refusing to learn the lessons of history and why we probably should leave some things in the past. Or maybe it's not that deep, but something tells me it is. Meanwhile, Cassian and Melshi have come across some aliens and, in a frankly hilarious scene, just start running out in the open to try and steal their ship. And then they're caught. But to everyone's surprise, these aliens hate the Empire too. Their ocean factories ruined their water and their planet. So they're like, you know what? You look like you've been through enough. Do you guys need a ride? I love that it would have caused way less grief if Cass and Melshi had simply just walked up to them and asked for safe passage somewhere. But it's fine, it all worked out. Está bien. The news of Marva's death also reaches Cyril Karn, by the way. That sergeant he worked with on Ferrix calls him up in the middle of the night to tell him about the funeral. And Cyril gets way too excited because, of course, it's another chance to find Cassian Andor. And of course, he didn't let it go despite everyone, including the woman of his dreams, also telling him to let it go. Mama Karn is similarly unimpressed at his antics and goes back to sleep. What a queen. I love her. By the way, Cyril was unemployed for a while, so he doesn't actually have the funds to travel all the way to Ferrix. So what does he do? Steals from Mama Karn's safe. The desperation has reached a fever pitch, I see. Luthen meets with Saw Gerrera again. This time Saw has decided to join Anto Krieger's raid on Spellhouse, but only if Anto agrees to his terms. And Luthen goes, wait, no, you definitely should not join Anto Krieger at this moment, because Anto and his men are all going to die, and I'm going to let them. Saw's like, wait, what? Basically, Luthen is not going to tell Anto Krieger that he knows the ISB knows about his planned attack. Because again, if he tells Anto, Anto will call it off, and then the ISB will know that they have a traitor in their ranks, which will jeopardize Lonnie's ability to keep feeding the rebellion vital information on the Empire's movements. Anto and all of his men are going to be sacrificed to keep the rebellion safe. The ISB currently thinks Anto's group is the entire rebellion, and Luthen wants to keep it that way, at least for now. So Saw eventually agrees not to go. He also agrees not to tell Anto that the ISB is aware, and to let his attack go on as planned. Neither Luthen nor Saw are happy about the fact that they're about to lose dozens of good men, and even worse because they know about it beforehand. And now it will always haunt them. More ghosts for Luthen to share his dreams with. But this is the cost of war. They've both given up their inner peace and moral compass for the peace of others. Luthen doesn't go back to Coruscant, but instead decides to go to Ferrix because he wants to find Cassian too. Well, join the club, sir. There's already plenty of members here. Again, Cassian is that wild card for the rebellion. He's too talented and he knows too much, and that makes him dangerous. Luthen just can't have him walk free. But there's a slight hiccup on Luthen's journey there. And by a slight hiccup, I mean one of my favorite flying sequences in all of Star Wars. Luthen's Fondor ship has been caught in a tractor beam of an Imperial patrol. They think he's one of Saw's pirates. And even after Luthen's ship identifies itself as an Alderaanian trade ship, they still continue to pull it in. The Imperials clearly don't care about diplomacy at this point. So Luthen is forced to show his hand, and we get this incredibly cool scene where we find out Luthen's ship is definitely not your average trade vessel, which the Imperials were absolutely not expecting. Their tractor beam is disintegrated, and then their ship is wrecked, to put it mildly. And now for the part that truly broke my brain, his ship has lightsabers. They just ignite on either side and just cut through those TIE fighters like they're butter. And then Luthen just punches it like nothing ever happened. Just his average day at the office. I genuinely lost my mind when I first watched this scene, and I kid you not have watched it about 20 times since. Luthen slayed. Literally. He's so cool. His ship is so cool. I want to be him when I grow up. But maybe without all the trauma. I have plenty of my own, thank you very much. So the kind aliens drop Cassian and Melshi off back on Niamos, which to me seems unwise, seeing as that's where they were arrested in the first place. But it's because Cassian's come to retrieve his belongings, which include the money Luthen paid him for Aldhani, and, notably, Nemik's manifesto. Cassian calls his friend Zan back on Ferrix to pass on a message to Marva that he loves her and that he'll be home soon, but then Zan tells him the news that she's gone. And Cassian is devastated. It's just so sad. Like, he didn't stay away this long on purpose. He was literally in prison. And if he hadn't been arrested, he probably would have been able to go back sooner and say goodbye. But there is still a way for him to say goodbye, because Zan tells him the funeral hasn't happened yet, so there's still time. Even though it's a colossally bad idea for him to go back to Ferrix, with the sheer number of people looking for him on both sides of the war. But Cassian makes the decision to go back because that's just love. Nothing you can do about that. Melshi vows to spread the word and tell everyone what the Imperials are really doing. Then he and Cassian go their separate ways, but as brothers now, until they reunite later as fellow rebels. I love Melshi. Good lad. We end the episode with Cassian on the beach, staring morosely into the sunset in yet another parallel to Scarif. Beaches are just not good places for Cassian to be, is the lesson I'm taking from all of this. I'll talk more about this later, but my personal headcanon in the event that the Rogue One crew actually survived Scarif is that they really, really enjoyed the rebel base on Hoth. To the confusion of everyone else, including Han Solo, who keeps complaining about how the only thing colder than this hell-frozen-over planet is Princess Leia's attitude towards him. Look, to the Rogue One family, it's just a nice welcome change from tropical locales, which now feel ominous to be in. Episode 12, Rick's Road. We have finally arrived at the end of the road, Rick's Road, and everything is converging on Ferrix, where both the Rebellion and the Empire are gathering in expectation that Cassian is going to show up to his mother's funeral. Dedra is here. She tells her troops that she wants Cassian alive for questioning. She's also brought a spy along. I think his name is Corv. Pretty sure his entire job is to just wander the streets looking for Cassian, which is extremely funny to me because his whole outfit just screams detective with his little hat and cape. He's just missing the monocle, and then he'll look the part. Vel and Cinta are also here. They've seen Dedra and the rest of the ISB arrive, so they conclude that Cassian is definitely coming back to Ferrix. Cinta, completely in the zone. She has no brain space at the moment to think about romance, which makes Vel very sad. I think we're starting to see Vel go down an interesting road. She wants to be able to love Cinta and find belonging in the rebellion, but she does seem to be unsure of her place in things at present. Cassian returns to Ferrix the night before Marva's funeral. He doesn't immediately let anyone know that he's home. He first goes to visit his father Clem's brick, and we get a flashback scene of Clem teaching a young Cassian how to clean rusty parts so that they're brand new. But what he's really trying to teach Cassian is that greatness can be found anywhere, even in places where it seems like it's too late. You just have to be able to look beneath the rust. And Cassian's face as he remembers this says it all. He's realizing that it's not too late for him to become someone he can be proud of. Cassian waits for daylight, listening to Nemik's manifesto, which again is full of these incredible banger lines. But my favorite is probably the one where Nemik says that one day, one single thing will break the siege. And I thought that was a really nice way to foreshadow the events of Rogue One. All in all, this one was one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. It's Nemik's words overlaying Cassian as he ponders their meaning, and as they inspire him to finally step out of the shadows, not as a man on the run, but as a rebel. Mon Mothma, meanwhile, is sending her own plans into motion. In their fancy hover car, she accuses Perrin of gambling yet again, which she knows is actually untrue. She also knows that her driver is an ISB plant and is listening in on their conversation despite her asking them for privacy. She has to cover her tracks for the 400k hole in her account somehow, and one way to do that is to throw her husband completely under the bus by insinuating that his gambling habit is what caused it. So the ISB for now has been thrown off the scent. Poor Perrin, though, I gotta say, this is the one time he's being sincere and Mon knows it. But we have to save the rebellion. Save the dream. Also, the ISB is throwing like a watch party where they're seeing Anto Krieger's raid be ambushed in real time. Look at them. It's like their depraved version of the Super Bowl or something. So, Anto and his men were indeed slaughtered, and Lonnie was there to watch, knowing that Luthen let them all be killed so that Lonnie's life would be safe. This man will 100% need some therapy after all this is over, if he makes it. Cassian reunites with Brasso, they hug it out. Like I said, Brasso is Cassian's homie for life, and Cassian expresses his grief and regret that he left without Marva, that he was going to come back for her, and now she's gone. But Brasso tells him Marva left him one last message, and that is that once he figures everything out, he will be an unstoppable force for good, and that she loves him more than anything he could ever do wrong. Chat, we started crying. I'm still crying now, on the inside. Cassian knows Bix is being held captive by Dedra, so he tells Brasso he's going to rescue her. And Brasso just goes, "What, you're going to take on a full garrison?" And Cassian just gives him this look. What, like it's hard? Well, he's done it before. Cyril and Sarge are also en route to Ferrix because Cyril can't stop, won't stop when it comes to Cassian Andor. Luthen has arrived, looking swagalicious in his coat. He meets up with Vel, but no one's seen Cassian yet. Luthen at this point knows about Dedra and that she's looking for him, which surprises Vel. That means she must not know about Lonnie then, because Lonnie's the one that told Luthen about Dedra. Again, Luthen carrying way too much information on his own. The pressure seems to be mounting. Luthen tells them to wait for Dedra to capture Cassian, and then they'll go in there and kill him before she starts asking him questions. But what neither the rebels, Cyril, nor Dedra have factored into their grand plans is that Cassian is a master of stealth in his own right, and that he has more than a few tricks up his sleeve, and that he still has friends on Ferrix who want to protect him. This includes Brasso and Zan, who are leading the funeral procession. Everything happens very quickly. Hordes of people are filling the streets, which Dedra's troops were not expecting. Actually, neither the rebels nor the Imperials seem to know what's going on. They both seem to be confused because the funeral has started hours before they thought it would. There's a marching band, which, if you listen carefully, is actually playing the Andor theme, so that was a nice touch. There's too many people for the Imperials or Luthen to keep track of Cassian in the crowd, but Cassian is nearby, and he actually spots Luthen there. And he instantly knows that Luthen is probably there to kill him. But he was expecting that, because Cassian has learned a thing or two since meeting Luthen, which again is to be a million steps ahead of your foes. B is also there because Marva has left a message for her fellow Ferrixians, which he plays in front of the crowd. Marva's speech is yet another one of those defining moments for Andor. I think the writing here is so impactful, especially when she tells everyone that they've been sleeping. And while they were asleep, the darkness that is the Empire has come right up to their doorstep. It's here and it's not visiting anymore. It wants to stay. Just again highlighting that the Empire's strategy so far has been to choke the galaxies so slowly they don't realize what's happening until it's too late. But my girl Marva has caught on to their tricks and their lies, just like the rest of the rebellion, and now Cassian and the Ferrixians. It's such an electrifying sort of moment. Luthen's face when he hears Marva's speech is just incredible. Like, this is actually the first time we've seen a flicker of real joy on his face, because it's finally happening. The rebellion is here, and the Ferrix is the spark that'll light the fire to burn the Empire down. Marva tells them all to fight back, but an Imperial officer tries to shut down B playing her message, and that's when all hell breaks loose. Because to the Ferrixians, nobody puts Marva in a corner. Salman's son sets off a bunch of bombs, which blows up most of the square and dials the chaos to like 11. Cassian, meanwhile, has gone to find Bix. I do want to point out that he's just made his first major sacrifice, which was his chance to say goodbye to Marva. Because if he doesn't go to Bix now, she'll be lost to him forever, just like Marva. He's learned that he has to go back and show up for the people that matter to him, which, as we saw in Rogue One, was such a huge part of his relationship to Jyn. Like, he really is becoming the boy who always comes back, who will one day be there for the girl who always gets left behind. Chat, we cried again. Bix is not at all in good shape. Her mind seems to be scrambled. She tells Cassian she dreamed Marva was there in the room talking to her during her speech rather than through her funeral message outside, to which Cassian plays along and goes, "Yeah, totally. Wasn't she great?" Aw, Cass. I'm emo. But yeah, he can also see that Girly is not okay. In between the fighting between the Imperials and the Ferrixians, Dedra is knocked down by the crowd, but is rescued by Cyril, her unexpected knight in shining armor. Once again, there's this weird, attractive energy between them. Dedra is so shaken up because she'd almost been caught in a stampede, but she doesn't quite understand how to express her gratitude to him for saving her life. Presumably because she's never had to say those words ever in her life to someone who wasn't her superior. Look at them. My favorite emotionally stunted fascist weirdos. Also, Cinta kills Corv. Just straight stabs him with a tiny little knife. We cheered again. Cassian successfully rescues Bix and gets her to the ship where Brasso, Salman's son, and B are escaping on. But Cassian's not going with them. He has one last thing to do before he leaves Ferrix. B is so sad Cassian's not coming with them, and it broke my heart once again to see this little droid want to be with his family and the plot isn't letting him. But Cassian tells B that he's counting on him to take care of Bix, because B always comes through. And I'm fine. And then Bix says that Cassian will find them again, because he's their symbol of hope. And rebellions are built on hope. And then the ship flies off, leaving Cassian to do that one final thing. Before the season ends, we get a brief glimpse of Lita being presented to Davos Skulden's son, so it seems that Mon has had no other choice but to accept his offer. Yikes! And the episode concludes with Luthen returning to his ship after what is probably the most eventful funeral he's ever been to, but Cassian is already there waiting for him. Which, look, the events of today were already not what Luthen was expecting, but this takes the cake. He's like, how did you even find me? Cassian asks Luthen if he came here to kill him. Luthen gives his classic vague answer and says, well, you don't make it easy. But Cassian ain't here to play no games no more. He goes, well, I'll make it easy now. Here's your blaster. Either kill me or take me in. It's your choice. And then Luthen quirks the tiniest of smiles, but it's also the truest smile we've ever seen him give. So we know his answer. He's in. And the end. Guys, I am so stupidly excited for season 2. I'm like gnawing at the bars of my enclosure at this point. I know the wait will be over soon, but it can't come soon enough. As far as where I think season 2 will go, I know it's supposed to span a few years and go right up to the beginning of Rogue One. I've heard rumors that some major characters from the movie will show up. I know Orson Krennic is back. He was shown in the trailer, but I've heard there might be others who haven't been officially announced yet. And they might even be Jyn Erso herself, which I would love if that happened. I know she doesn't actually meet Cassian until Rogue One, but it would be cool to see what she's been up to this whole time. If nothing else, it would give us some more delicious parallels to Cassian's journey. So if they've somehow gotten Felicity Jones to show up on set, Tony Gilroy, you will have my sword. That's all I have to say on that. I'm really intrigued to see where Cassian's journey goes from here. At this point in the show, he's pretty much the person we meet in Rogue One, so I'm wondering what his development is going to look like, especially when we consider that there will be some time skips between the episodes. I think we'll probably see him starting to do some things he isn't proud of in service of the rebellion, and how he deals with that. This would tie in nicely into why he sides with Jyn on the whole Scarif mission in the first place, because Scarif in his eyes was the one thing that would redeem him. I'm also wondering if he will ever find his sister. That whole plot point kind of dropped off after the first episode, but I do hope they revisit that and that she's out there somewhere. I really hope Bix and the others who escape all get to live somehow. We saw both Bix and Brasso in the trailer too, but considering that we never see them in Rogue One, there's a very good chance that they don't make it to the end. And that makes me really sad, so I shall not think about it. In the same way that I aggressively avoid thinking about how all of Rogue One died on Scarif, because that's not true. Another rogue rescue shuttle picked them up right before the fireball on the horizon swallowed them up. Look, this may be delulu of me, and I'll talk more about this when I actually make a video dedicated to Rogue One, but in my eyes, the universe where they all lived will always be the more interesting one to me, because that's where their lives together really begin. It's the found family, the slow burn after months of tiptoeing around each other, the what could have been of it all that will always live at the front of my mind. Plus, it's fun to imagine their interactions with the OT trio, just them existing in the same space as Leia and Luke and Han. Anyway, I'm very excited to see Cassian meet K2, which I also heard will happen. I'm sure the sparks will fly immediately and probably literally, as there likely will be explosions going on in the vicinity or something. Speaking of droids, I also hope B2 Emo makes it, because he's just too cute to die. It's not likely, but a girl can dream. Luthen's journey is going to be interesting. I really think he's going to crack at some point. He's already showing the signs of it at the end of season 1 because, again, he's just carrying so much on his conscience. And again, we also don't see him in Rogue One, so I'm thinking he'll either crumble or he'll be killed. Dedra, I think, is going to continue girl bossing, but I have a feeling she's going to girl boss a tad too close to the sun. I wonder how she's going to navigate climbing the Empire's ranks going forward, especially with her mission on Ferrix being a failure. And with her being the only woman officer in the ISB, I imagine it's just going to get more difficult from here on. Cyril Karn. I have heard some theories that he will actually defect to the rebellion, and I actually think this might be true. Because Cyril isn't strictly an Imperial, he believes in the Empire, but I think he believes in justice more. And since we know that the Empire is full of corruption and constantly rewrites the rules on what justice is, it'll quickly become clear that the Empire has no sense of justice. And I'm thinking Cyril will slowly realize this as he works with Dedra. Ooh, and then he and Dedra will be on opposite sides. The drama that'll entail. Delicious. Yeah, I'm Team Cyril Karn joining the cause. Justice. And last but not least, Mon Mothma. Her character arc will probably be the most intense because at this point she still has her senator status and her family. And we know that by the time Rogue One comes around, she won't have either of those. Like I said before, Mon has the most to lose, and she's going to have to lose it if she wants to help lead the rebellion. I believe the Gorman massacre was shown in the season 2 trailer, if I remember correctly, and according to lore, that's what leads to Mon publicly declaring her support for the rebellion and her being exiled from the Imperial Senate. So I wonder what will happen to Perrin and Lita when all of this happens. Do they go with her? Probably not, considering that they were never really on her side before. So I don't think they will be after. Okay, I think I've yapped about Andor long enough. Season 2 comes out in just a few days, so we'll know if my speculation was right or if I was completely off base. The Yavin base, in case you were wondering. But I think it'll be a wild ride either way, and I will be seated for it. Trust. If you guys have watched Andor and are also in the enclosure with me waiting for season 2, let me know your thoughts down below on where you think this is all going to go. And as always, if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see y'all in a galaxy far, far away real soon. Bye bye.